Hopefully everybody can hear me. Hopefully everybody can see me. Welcome again to one of these Zoo webinar series featuring me, and I will introduce my co-host for this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending where you're calling. So thank you very much for joining us across Canada, across Saskatchewan, maybe even across the world. We'll see. These webinars are interesting because we always have such a short amount of time. We know that most people are here calling in at lunch or joining in at lunch. So we want to get right to it. So today's talk is going to be really just diving into some of the research that we've been doing around just the future of experiences to do with like user experience and behaviors, and really going to be calling out these sort of AI agents or taskbots. So hopefully the folks who are tuning in have something to do with like delivering services on your end, and hopefully it'll be relevant. Well, who's all here? Well, that's an easy one. We got me and Shane. Oh, before I actually start introducing us, I do want to say that in the Zoom window, if you don't like the size of my face being super big and you want more of the content, there is like a little slider that you can have supposedly to minimize the size of my face, which I recommend to everybody, or else you will be scarred for the rest of eternity. This is me. I also have Shane with me, Shane Giroux, who is the Director of Technology at Zoo. Him and I have worked together for almost 23 years, which is strange, straight out of college. But so yeah, we're kind of a tag team duo. I handle the strategy and design departments, while Shane really handles all the technology decisions at the organization. But who are we in general? If you haven't known, most of the people we see register have some relationship with Zoo, but they're definitely some strangers. We're Zoo. We're like your local experience design partner, which is kind of what a website company would have kind of grown into. You know, we're definitely evolving with technology. So seeing the advent of all the things that have happened since 1995, we're an agency of about 40 people, and we're primarily located in Saskatoon. This is the type of stuff that we really do day to day. A lot of stuff to do with design, research, engagement with users, advocating human-centered design. Then we also do the design, whether it's brand design all the way down to UX, UI design, all the way down to the deployment of all the technology stuff that we do, which is developing websites, mobile applications. But also, we can't be here if we're not talking about AI and like what that's going to do for the next few years or even tomorrow, because it changes so quick. So what we're going to do is just kind of dive into really where we are, give a little bit of a history. Shane's going to kind of come in and talk about the technical stuff that's happening within websites, web applications, and just behavior and the technology that's happening. So I think that that is the prime rib of the actual presentation, while I'm just here to kind of put some bumpers on the storyline. So why are we here? This is a question we always ask ourselves at the very beginning of any talk. And why are you giving up your lunch to kind of listen to this? Well, I like to say we're here because work isn't getting easier. We're actually working harder and trying to coordinate more complicated things. The idea behind technology is that it's supposed to make things easier, but I just don't know if it has. I think it's just actually made it more complicated, especially for us who are delivering experiences, designing experiences for users, because in theory, the life of the user is supposed to get easier, right? Like you're supposed to have delivery at your fingertips, and you're supposed to be able to call a cab with your phone, and don't even have to interact with anybody for payments. But that's the theory. And my hot take is that I actually don't think life is getting easier. I think food is worse. I think delivery is slower and more complicated than it was in the past. And food's not even better. I just feel like we've created all these sort of shortcuts in life, but I don't know if we've actually made it easier. And that's kind of the same thing for work. It just seems like it's just piling on. It's not actually getting simpler. And so because of that, I always feel like we're playing catch up. And I don't know, especially here in the prairies, sometimes, we're always looking outside, and we're always just saying that, hey, maybe everybody else is doing all these fantastically innovative things, but what are we doing here? And sometimes it feels like we're almost just playing along. And this is a challenge. And the theme for this talk is me being kind of disgruntled about being in this industry. It's a hard thing. You're always keeping up with the next thing, whether it's social, mobile, and now AI and VR and ML and all these different things that are coming in blockchain. Because I always said that customer service was so much more easy back in the day. It's gotten to a level where it's very complicated to understand how to design for users. everybody kind of remembers like what the look of the 80s and 90s felt like. It was very unidirectional, and you just had these sort of like simple things like the credit card machine. I don't even know what it's called, but those are innovations in customer experience. I'd like to think back to things like the phone, for example, like 70s, 80s, and 90s. There wasn't that many innovations happening in just telephone calls. The things like the redial buttons and the speed dial and like the voicemail, those type of things were things that designers had to pay attention to and design for. That's just one small industry. But if you think about zooming out as experience designers, what we have to pay attention to from a technology standpoint that affects experience, it's constant, it's huge, every one of these little things, and this is just a snippet of all the things that are happening. We have to understand how this applies to the overall end experience. And you have to have a strategy, a policy. You have to rule it out, rule it in, and you have to be an expert on it. We're all sort of like supposedly an expert on all of this stuff. That's impossible. But yet, as a consultant, you kind of have to know all about it, which is very high pressure for people like us. So before we start getting into like where we're going, I want to kind of talk about like let's look back at how we sort of arrived here. And again, this isn't like a very like deep history, but just the idea of like where internet started. And I know this is just I'm picking a point in time, but we all kind of remember like Web 1.0 and like how like basic it was. It was kind of the thing that disrupted business at the time. But really, when you think about it, it was just like, okay, here you go, dog food, click here. Websites like this, very simple, kind of, no, there was nobody grading how good the experience was as long as it could do it. So websites were coming out, in the late 90s, mid 90s, and finding their place in society. But at the same time, early in my career, I got turned on to AI through like a contest that my buddy and I, who was an engineer, way smarter than me, we had an AI guitar pedal product that we were trying to prototype and patent. It was a guitar pedal that could actually model real amps. And so my engineer friend, who was obviously like introducing me to in 2003 or 2004 into this world of AI, was talking about, neural networks and MATLAB and using all these different tools to use like to create this sort of application. And we were trying to get the patent off the ground and went to like trade shows and try to sell it. It was a real good way to cut our teeth in this, especially developing technology. But ultimately, we were just starting our career, so it never actually formed into anything. But it was kind of neat to see that this technology is available now. We were way ahead of the game, and it could have been something. And maybe I wouldn't have been here. Maybe I would be on a yacht somewhere. Who knows how much this would have sold for? But the whole idea is that it would be an AI sort of it kind of brain inside of this guitar pedal. So, anyways, that was my introduction. And AI kind of went a little bit dormant in sort of pop culture for, the greater part of 10 years before, it was being always used in the background of a lot of things, but it necessarily wasn't like the thing that was a retail application. But going back again to with the website world in the early 2000s, we all remember these sort of wild wests that existed when all these new introductions of technology would happen. You'd have a wild west of all these companies trying to get your eyeballs on their search engine. I'm going to use this kind of graphic for the entirety of this presentation, but just to show that all these sort of brands were just coming at you and they wanted your attention. They wanted to be everything to you. We knew what websites or search engines were back in the day. They were just like big indexes of saying, hey, you want some casinos? Here are all the places you can find casinos. That's essentially what it was. It was very complicated at the time, but it's also evolved itself into way deeper into our lives and way more helpful. So it actually could deep link into exactly the context that you're looking for. So you didn't necessarily need to like use the homepage, and it decreased the value of the homepage design greatly. And so this is another thing we're going to talk about is like just the whittling away of the importance of a website. While the search engines war were going, we also hit like mid 2000s, early 2000s of the aughts, and we had the same sort of like Wild West. That was like the social media edition, the evolution of all the social media channels. And again, what you saw, all these sort of brands coming at us. Some of them are the same brands as before in the search engine world. But then you saw some new players come in, and some of them are here and some of them aren't anymore. Few years later, only a few years later, all of a sudden you saw the mobile edition. You had carriers, you actually had phone hardware. Everybody was racing for your attention and thinking, we want to be the platform, we want to be the hardware as well. Again, some of the same players as all the stuff before, as you can kind of start seeing this pattern. It's like new technology comes out, everybody wants your attention. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. And so, where are we today? And how I like to say it is that we've sort of predicted everything through movies. The idea of having some sort of robotic assistant has not been something that is unfamiliar to us. It's been just portrayed over the last 50 years in movies that someday we're going to have these super intelligent, like helpful bots, or maybe sometimes not helpful, but mostly helpful, that can actually do a lot of the tasks that we're doing. And the whole idea is that we could kind of relax and they could do a lot of the stuff for us and make us a lot smarter. But that didn't really happen for about 30 years. We saw small improvements of it. The internet was kind of like the 1.0 version of it. But then something happened about 3 years ago, November 30th, 2022. If you remember, ChatGPT just got launched quietly. And it was this sort of this thing that people couldn't really understand. It was this generative AI, this idea that you could just put something into like a Google search bar and it would go way further than what Google could give you. And it was still just something that we were wrapping our heads around what these large language models were, trust, privacy, all these sort of things were coming. But I like to say that that changed everything, really. And I remember doing a podcast shortly after that in January, just a month later, saying, I think this is the biggest story of the year, is like just generative AI that's coming out. And I still stand by it because it's really kind of changed how we look at society. If you think about how fast ChatGPT got to 1 million users, it's just so much faster than it was from an adoption standpoint than everything else that's been kind of introduced. It's just, I think the power was realized really soon and really early. And then people realized, holy man, this could be the actual thing that's going to change the way that we work, the way we live. Just a quick review of like exactly how this system works. We call these large language models, and essentially like Google is like the librarian of, it indexes and it goes, hey, if you need something, go over here. Here's the book, go read it. That's on you to kind of figure it out. Imagine if that librarian essentially ate all the books, read every book, absorbed all the content that existed on the planet. It's almost impossible to think how deep that knowledge goes. And then you could ask that person. They didn't have to show you where to find it. They could actually just help you figure it out. That's sort of where we are with ChatGPT and like where we are with this sort of generative AI. So the question is like, how will this affect user experience, right? So you're starting to kind of see the shape of new terms come up. And so the term agentic is really the thing that we're starting to see, is like an AI agent essentially is when an AI system doesn't just answer questions, it actually takes initiatives, makes decisions, and carries out tasks on your behalf. I think people are starting to see every iteration of GPT or Claude or Perplexity is able to do more, and it can actually solve things, and it can actually do things on your behalf. So the whole idea is that it's going to be plugged in to your world. You think about open banking, you think about all the other things that it can be authenticated on your behalf to be able to act on your behalf. That sounds great, doesn't it? I know it sounds awesome. But also ultimately being on the service delivery side, which is us and the people hopefully listening, it's going to be more challenging. Like our job's to make it sure that it's easy for these AI taskbots to do their job. And so you have to start thinking about the delivery that you're going to be providing to your users and how this is going to affect it. So Shane's going to go into this a little bit more, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about what MCP is in the Model Talk Context Protocol. So it's essentially an API that's come out. And so just describing what it is, it's an open standard framework to standardize the way that AI models integrate and share data with external tools, systems, and data sources. Really, it's a way for your application, your website, to talk to AI taskbots. And it sounds small, but it's actually quite big in what it can do. So it's kind of like an API that you can apply virtually to any application to make it more AI friendly. And we'll break this down in a bit here, but just the overall experience might look like this, where you can just kind of talk to the ether and really have like a phone or any sort of AI agent that's kind of programmed with this to be able to kind of absorb the things that you want. And it will know exactly how to interact with these applications and do what you're asking it to do. Right now it's not the perfect system, but it will be a perfect system. And that's the whole thing where all these designers and technologists are working towards. So I'm going to bring in Shane, and he's going to kind of talk to you about like how an experience might look like, and it's really simplified. But this is where Shane's going to come in and just kind of walk you through a little demo that we pre-recorded because we just can't trust live that this is going to work. But he's going to talk you through this pre-recorded demo of how this MCP and applications can work. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and he's going to take over.
Sure. Thanks, Al. I'll get the video shared up here, but I'm going to talk a little bit before I start playing it, just to kind of set the stage. So we have two concepts that we're going to demo to you because we wanted to make sure to provide something tangible to kind of go with the general concepts we're talking about. So you can see that this is more than just theory. This is actually achievable today. So what we did is we built two applications, just kind of demo apps. They're not actually plugged into anything specifically, but what they all have is they have forms for human input. They have an API for computer input, and then an MCP server that understands those APIs and what they can do. So I'll do the city issue reporter first, and I'll give the stage of why we decided to kind of build and demo this is that so my parents, they recently moved up from the farm to the city. And with all the other things they had to learn how to contact the city when issues arose. And initially for that, they were using me as kind of their personal AI agent. So one day my mom had texted me that a tree, a big branch on one of their trees had fallen off. It was blocking the sidewalk. She thought maybe there's a security risk too. The tree was a bit unstable. She didn't know what to do. So I had to go search on the city website to figure out who I should contact. And I'm pretty familiar with the city site, but it still took me a minute or two to find a number. I got placed on hold for a few minutes before finally talking it through with a human. And so here I felt I was, I'm taking up my time finding this form, calling a number, waiting on hold, taking up a city employee's time to tell them, a tree fell, please come take care of it. It felt like it should have been a bit more of a transactional workflow. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a tool that we could report this issue where I could receive a reporting number, track it from start to finish. And then we kind of went a little bit extra and said, what if we plug this tool in via an MCP server so we could actually talk to the tool via our agents? So I'm going to start the video here and I'm going to talk through as the video goes. I might have to pause a few times just to detail what I'm getting at here. But this should look pretty familiar to you. 50% of what we do on websites is filling out forms. Don't fact check me on that exact number. So I can start filling it out and I manually type in some things. I hope autofill maybe get some stuff in. Here I needed to adjust that. Now I've entered my personal details and it's asking me for a location, give me an example. Here's my autofill kind of, confusing me. Oh, which of these autofills do I need to use? I have to decide which one it is. I realize there's, maybe it's not typed the best, but I'll move along. I'm a human. It wants a big description. I'm just going to say a tree fell on the street. And I'll submit my report. And then I realize I missed a field that was up there. I got to go back. Another little kind of context decision here of where was it, right? It was a tree. Now I can finally submit it. Now, that isn't too bad. It's a pretty small form, but there's cognitive load that went into that. I had to do my own error correction. I had to figure out the form needed. I had to find where the form was. And so we'll just pop back into the backend system that we built here and show, here, this actually got reported in. And at this point, imagine that this backend is actually like an integrated system at the city or somewhere else where the form submitted to, and someone's going to pick up this ticket. They're going to triage it, assign it out. It's going to get status updates. So I might be able to follow along as this ticket moves through the system. So this is all a pretty standard flow. The user fills out a form, goes into a backend. But what if I go and use an agent to help me out with this? So I'm going to use Claude, which is basically ChatGPT, just by a different company. And the reason I'm using Claude is up until about a month ago, ChatGPT didn't actually allow connecting to external servers. So it's a pretty fast-moving tech world. Even ChatGPT can end up falling behind here. So I'm going to get into Claude and I'm going to start a new chat. And I'm kind of just going to talk to it. In this case, it's kind of an abrupt message. I'm just going to say a tree fell. And because it knows about the form, the API to that form, it actually pauses and says, oh, first it says, sorry about that. They're always very nice and polite. And then it says, hey, do you want me to help you file that report? Which is absolutely what I want it to do. It's not giving me information. It's just saying, hey, I can help take care of this problem for you. So I say, yes, please. We got to be nice to the machines. Don't want to get them upset. And it dumps out some extra context here of what it all needs. Now, I'm a human, so I'm not going to read all of that, but I'm going to kind of go, I think this is what it needs. And notice here, I'm not having to type in my email is this, the address is this. I'm just giving it that data, trusting that the agent is going to kind of figure this out. So I'm going to give, again, a pretty brief description. A large tree fell on the street here. So we submit this. And what's going to happen now is it's telling me that it's going to make this call to the City Saskatoon site to check if I have an account already. And if I pop this open, I see it sending in my email address. So yes, it was able to figure out, the first entry I gave in there was my email address. So I'm going to allow it. It's going to get a response back. And then the agent is going to say, okay, here's what the next steps are. And in this case, it's able to just move right along and say, like, great, found your account. I'm going to file this ticket for you. And if we look here, it actually cleaned up what I entered for the location. So it made it a little bit nicely formatted, added the actual city and province. And then it actually built on the description I gave to hopefully make it a little bit more clear to someone. So that was pretty handy for the AI. So glad that it did that. We just allow it to go through. And it ends up spitting back out, perfect, I'm all done. Here's the details of it. Now, it's asking for the same fields as the form did. And so it's not really much different, but the cognitive load felt a lot simpler. It felt a little bit more breezy for me as a user to do this. I'm just kind of talking to someone. I'm not having to go figure out what a form is, where it is, and everything. And it kind of went a little bit more quickly. And imagine now the back end has information about this ticket that I could pop back into this agent at any point and ask, what's the status of this ticket? Where's it at? And the agent is just going to remember all this stuff. I don't have to go look up, what was my report ID again? Oh, I got to go log back into the system. It's all just a little bit more simpler now that we can just have conversations with our agents who take on that cognitive load of remembering everything for us. So we're going to switch to the next one, which is a student loan application form. So again, it's a new system. I've got to log into it. And I noticed that it's a multi-step form. So lots of info, lots of brain power to fill out here. So I'm going to start filling it in. It wants the school name that I'm going to go to. Now I got to make sure I type it in all correctly. I wouldn't want to get denied because I had a typo in the school name. I'm going to do my graduate degree. I'm going to continue down the computer science field. When we head over to the next form and we go, okay, I got to get my enrollment status. I'll stay full-time. Pick your graduation date. Well, it starts with today. I got to scroll all the way down, classic date drop-downs on web forms, and I'll just pick about 2 years from now. Next one here, I got to decide, what am I going to do? I'm going to stay employed, and I make about 5K. Oh, got to get that zero out of there. Again, don't want to make any mistakes on the form. So I'm going to submit this here, and it's going to do the same thing. Application submitted successfully. Now, presumably, this is a system where I'll have gotten, an email or something to try and remember what the details of my application are. So I'm going to switch back over to Claude, and I'm going to talk through again. And I'm going to be a bit more conversational this time with it. So I'm just going to grab, I didn't want to type this all in directly, so I copy paste it in. Looks like I type really fast here. And I just tell it, I'm heading back to grad school, need to apply for a loan. And again, it's super nice to me, tells me that's super exciting, and it can help me get started with this loan application. And it knows the first thing is, do I have an account in that existing system? So it's going to do the same thing where I tell it what my email is. I'll also note that I've set Claude up to not remember context between these different chats, but just imagine that it would know that this is my email address and it would have been able to take care of this for me already. And so it's going to go and say, okay, I've got to check. And we can notice here, it's calling a get user by email method again, but it's under the student loan application. So even though the two methods were named the same, it understands the context and which one it needs to call. So we'll let that happen. And indeed, I have applied for a student loan before, so I've got an account in the system. And again, it spits out a bunch of information. Again, I'm a human. I'm not reading all that. So I'm just going to go, okay, I'll talk through what it probably needs here. So I start filling in some information, but I'm going to get a bit more casual with it. So I say I'll get my comp sci PhD at the U of S. I don't fill everything out. I'm kind of trusting the agent to take take my hand with this and help me out. Expect to graduate in a couple years. I'll be a full-time student and a full-time employee because everybody loves to do two full-time jobs essentially. And so we'll see what it asks me now. So again, it extrapolated everything perfectly and it said, aha, a computer science PhD at the University of Saskatchewan. But it noted that it wants a specific graduation date, which is fair enough. And I forgot to give it my income. So I'm going to do the same thing where I just kind of go, I don't want to, I'll graduate in August, but I don't remember how many days there are in August. So I'll just tell it end of August, 2027. And then for my annual income here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 5K. So again, I'm being very casual with this, talking to it like I might talk to a person. And we'll see what it comes up with when it makes the actual call out to the system. So we'll pop it open and we can see it actually did perfectly fill in. There's 31 days in August. And then it extrapolated and said 5K. He obviously means 5,000 as a number. And we're going to send that off to the system. So it's all going to come back and it's filed this application. It's got an ID. And again, we can imagine that if this was part of, a provincial or federal loan system, now I can talk to my agent and get status updates. I don't have to dig into my emails again. I don't have to look up the link for where the student portal is. I don't have to remember what my loan application ID was. I have my agent for that. It's going to take on all that contextual load for me and let me do other things and not lose any brain power on that. So again, I typed about the same probably as filling in the form, but it was a little less draining on my brain to speak more like a human versus converting it to a more machine-like cadence that the web forms kind of box us into. So we're talking to the agents in a way that makes sense to us, and it's not necessarily in the way that the form designers decided we needed to enter that information. I can put it in reverse order, out of order. The agent's going to sort it out with me. I don't have to think too hard about it. So we're essentially entering an age where the abstraction between humans and machines is growing even greater. And it's these agents that are helping bridge that gap and take that load off of us as humans. And I was thinking, last night, and then to Albert's point about the telephone, and I was remembering, when voice commands came out on cell phones, and we always tried to, call mom. No, 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 call mom. And it never worked, right? But it was showing that we desperately want to just talk to the machines. And we're really getting closer to that with these agents. So that was the end of my demo. I'm going to turn it back over to Al to finish the talk here.
Okay, right on, Shane. Yeah, the whole idea of, we did the demo earlier, and I remember Tanmay just like speaking in Hindi to it, and that changed my like whole idea. Okay, so I can perfect. Share my screen. And just the idea that like you could just switch between French and any language. And that just changes the way you look at these agents going, oh wow, it's more than just like a machine that can just like take in like text. It takes in like context and language. So I mean, again, the power of it is kind of infinite. So you can imagine if that's going to be the experience in the future, how excited we're going to be that we don't have to deal with these large menus and understanding and these crazy mental models to kind of figure out how to do something. Because it didn't just allow you to fill out that form, it found it for you. And so you were doing something where you never even had to go to the screen anymore. If you think about these like just general government sites. This is just an example of a provincial government site and their list of services that you can go. It's going to be hard to search for exactly what you're looking for, not to mention like some of these titles, like you just don't even understand what vital statistics would even be. This is what we're trying to bypass essentially. And this is what humans are trying to bypass. You don't want to mess around with these sort of big menus and these complicated forms. And I know not everybody hears from a government kind of arm, but just the idea of governments, they just have so many hundreds of services to offer citizens, is that you could be doing so much with agents in the future of how people are going to be interacting with your site or your applications. And it could be like property tax or garbage pickup. You can set up recurring payments if you're all authenticated. You could be doing building permits. Building permits, huge challenge, massive forms, and usually run off with third-party software. But as the city, you should be sort of understanding that like you're still responsible for this, and you have to kind of find vendors that are going to be able to interact and integrate with these sort of NCPs. So again, looking through the government sort of lists of activities, you have so many different types of services. So imagine never having to deal with these sort of things like, paying property taxes, submitting receipts, applying for childcare, getting matched with a family doctor. All these things could be done, if we on the service delivery side set our sort of systems up properly. These are just a small snippet of examples of different sort of services governments can be offering. Okay, so let's just talk about the rise of these bots and like where they're going to be seen, and how they're going to be used. I use like using old references. This is from the $6 million man, $6 million man. That's funny. You could probably not even build like a basic robot for that price now. But the whole idea is that bots have been around, and as Shane said, it's like we were desperately trying to like mimic these sort of like contextual experiences, but they just weren't there. And I love talking about the digital world second chance Hall of Fame, because there's so many things in the digital world that really got a second crack at it, because sometimes the technology wasn't there. QR codes, perfect example, laughable 15 years ago, but actually legit now. COVID kind of talked us into using them again. And now if you show it, nobody really kind of squirms and goes, oh my God, quit making this trying to be a thing. Vine, we know it had a second chance with TikTok. Vine was the original TikTok, and I don't think the world was ready for it. Obviously, it's like now TikTok, but then bots, like we know what it felt like to chat with these really dumb systems that didn't understand it. And so we kind of got a sour taste in our mouth. But now these bots are going to be hyper intelligent. And really, the way that experiences are going to look are going to be like this. They're going to be integrated in everything that we do. Again, this is just the new Alexa. Like there's going to be the new Siri and like, all these new kind of bots built in that are going to be very intelligent. And they're not just going to be able to answer questions. They're going to be part of your everyday life. And so once you have an account, you're going to be connected, and it's going to know so much about you. So your whole life will be organized according to the future of this Amazon ad. Which brings me to the latest Wild West, the AI edition versus. I always put dots between my A and I's because it looks like Al, and I just like sometimes throws me off. So AI edition, it's kind of the same player, some new players in there. There's probably going to be consolidation that's going to be happening. There's already people buying, organizations buying each other, but they're fighting now. They're fighting again for your eyeballs. This is the new war, a new turf war. You got like Google, you have Facebook and Meta. They're all building out. They're over investing in AI structures and frameworks. That's definitely happening right now. An interesting experience to kind of showcase right now is just what websites are going to sort of look like. And Luke W is like a very, very sort of famed UI researcher, designer, and speaker. And he basically just dumbed down his entire website into not a structure, but just essentially like a bot. So he just put his own LLM, all the stuff into an LLM, and now you can just talk to it. And so all his content is just basically a conversation. So just an example of like, he gives you some free prompts there. So I just clicked one of them, and now it's creating content. This is exactly how Shane was kind of showing the other thing. It's like, it's just building content based upon his hundreds of articles and videos and writings and presentations he's ever done. And it creates the answer for you, which then you can keep asking more questions, and it can keep reshaping it. Luke actually says every time he reads an answer based upon these prompts, it's exactly what he would say, and he said sometimes even worded better than how he would have worded it himself. But he said it's very accurate because it's trained on all his thoughts of the past. So just trying to think about your website now. Imagine if you didn't have a navigation, you didn't have information architecture. It was just in this big dirty database that you could just talk to, and then you got what your answers were. That would be kind of a totally different experience. And it's going to change the way that humans behave in general. So right now that there's this big sort of dive and crash in website traffic around the world, it really has devastated it almost to like 48 or 50%. That was months ago. And really, they said that they're concerned that the new introduced AI mode is stopping users from visiting websites, marketing business, and damaging businesses that rely on SEO and clicks. And we know this. We're seeing this in real time. Like, give me a thumbs up if you are a very annoyed person when you're trying to look up a recipe and you have to sit through and sift through some person's trip to Italy and they're waxing poetic about like the relationship with their mom before you can actually just figure out I need to know how long to put salmon in the oven. This has completely avoided that. And so you can see on search results, you can just get the AI response because it is again trained on all the content that's on the internet. And so you're seeing a lot of these search engines provide this, which suppresses a lot of the traffic below, which is huge. That's billions of dollars in ad revenue and clicks, right? So it is going to change digital strategies as we know. Shane, I'm going to ask you again, just talking about like all these sort of like things that are happening and how it's going to affect our strategy is like, I know you and I debate and sometimes talk about content strategy, and you kind of have a hot take around just what content strategy should be in the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately content strategy becomes just part of a larger data strategy. When we're building websites, we're thinking how do we present the right words, images, and experiences, to people on a website, and that still matters. But we're not just presenting information to people now. We're presenting it to agents too. And these agents, they're not just reading a web page, they can query across databases, documents, APIs, raw text, to generate meaning and answers out of this. And it's interesting because I went to the U of S for a computer science degree, as did my wife, and she worked in the department for about a decade after that. And so I spent a lot of time talking to the profs there just about various things. But one they often asked was how they can stay relevant to industry's needs. And one of the things I kept, bringing up to them was they took what used to be a full course on databases and they just rolled it into the web development class. And I thought that did kind of a disservice to databases because data and databases are kind of the foundational backbone of everything. And that hasn't gone away, nor will it. But we're kind of seeing it expand beyond, just kind of traditional databases and into data lakes with multiple sources, multiple types of data, different formats, and it's all there for agents to process at like insane speeds. They can handle this scale in ways that us, kind of puny humans, we can't. And it might allow us to get a little lackadaisical on structure, but we need to stay really disciplined with it, because the quality of what they're going to return will still depend on how we design and describe that data, so structure, metadata, governance, that's not going to disappear. It just might be a bit more invisible to the end user. So like, as you noted with the search results, we're seeing, summaries of things. That's the top results on the search pages. So we're seeing that they're trying to deliver the information right to the people rather than directing them to where the information may be. So now we have to think about the data strategy that serves both the humans and machines. So, we think of people, journeys, tone, clarity. For machines, it's schemas, integrity, accessibility, authentication. So we kind of have to shift beyond content and take that broader view of data, make sure we get the right balance of human and machine needs, because it's no longer just about what content will we put up on a site, but what systems are we going to expose to those agents and what data are we going to feed to them?
Yeah, and right now it's still in the infancy of that stuff. So it's going to take on multiple sort of different shapes as the industry sort of evolves and kind of studies it. Because again, this is so new that nobody's like 100% certain exactly how this should work. Again, it's all based upon how users behave with it too. So um, yeah, so that's the content strategy and data strategy sort of debate. There's also like discussions around SEO, and obviously we just talked about how it's like taking a nosedive, and that's really going to get us to figure out like what are the new metrics in analytics? Is trust going to be a new analytics, and is clicks going to be something we don't pay attention to? But then even though overall just UX strategy, it's going to be completely like super layered to understand what do we do for the next thing. Again, this isn't to go and dive into exactly what UX strategies are going to look like, but just understand that it is going to kind of affect the way that we look at it because just the interaction is going to be different. But having said that, you got to don't worry that right now human interfaces will still be a thing. We're not necessarily just saying that we rush away and nobody's going to visit your site and it's just bots. Like there's still going to be demographics and certain people who just don't trust it. And so because of that, you're still going to have to kind of offer premier services for these people. And it'll take a while. I know nobody really has an understanding of how the adoption is going to be for this, but just, looking around 0 to 12 months, people are going to get more familiar with this sort of concept right now. And this is probably even three months ago that I said this. But in 0 to 12 to 24 months, maybe in the next year or two, you're going to start seeing those usual suspects, the big guys, really providing a lot more bot-enabled sort of services. So then you're being able to interact with them easily and quicker. And that's going to train us to be power users. But really, a lot of experts are really thinking 24 to 36 months, up to 3 years. There's going to be that widespread expectation that I should just be able to ask something and it automatically fills out and gets me a bus pass. And if you don't, that's when users get really disappointed and their baseline for experience is already raised. And especially these 17-year-olds in 5 years that are 21, they're going to not have patience for that. Which brings me to the next point of like our oath as designers. We're still designing systems. It might not be interfaces. It's maybe more contextual to like the dialogue and language, is that we still have to work really, really hard. And we just try to employ this idea to like all our clients is that like what we're doing on the back end is really, really hard so the users don't have to. So like it is as easy as just asking your thing to do your taxes. And everything else is just figured out for you. So that changes the way that we look at projects just in general, like these sort of personas that we do. We're going to have to understand what agent to agent like experiences are going to look like. And that's just like kind of a weird world that we're going to look at is like my robot's talking to your robot. But it's an eventually a reality that's going to hit us. And that's something I said, now that you know this kind of world's around, and if you have a project that is going to land in the next 2 or 3 years, I would think that it's a disservice to not even talk about that this is going to happen. You don't want to get caught in this world where you're like launching something and you know that the expectations are already changed. So I implore you guys to just like internally have these talks with your team because in the future, this is like the tone of what these future Gen Alphas are going to be saying is that, I guess back in the day, you had to go to sites and actually fill out forms. Gross. They probably use different terms than that, but I mean, like, this is what a Gen Xer thinks a Gen Alpha would talk like. Okay, that was really perfect timing because I have 2 minutes at the end here just to kind of talk about some shameless plug stuff. Like, hopefully, you guys have absorbed some of the stuff. We'd love to be able to work with you guys, help you guys kind of vision this stuff out, run some workshops to figure out how to do audits on this sort of stuff within your organization. That's essentially what we want to be able to do is help you really kind of almost like prototype small services with MCPs and just get you guys ready for this. You don't have to do this at a large scale, but again, this is where we can just open up discussions. And it's not like we have this out of the box package or product to sell. It's almost just our consulting and ability to go into your company and help you guys just make sense of it all. But if you really like what we're talking about right now, which is all about just human experiences and where it's going, I really encourage you guys to check out xcamp.ca, x-camp.ca. I've made that mistake. It's a conference that's about to happen in about 20 days from now in October here in Saskatoon. 2 days, all about customer experience, design, leadership, innovation. We have some amazing speakers coming in this year across Canada talking about experience visions, operationalizing experience within your organization, what these new titles of experience are. So if you're an analyst, you're a systems analyst, you're a writer, you're a brand person, content marketer, a tech person, a designer, there's something there for you across all the industries. We have a lot of government agencies, a lot of different industries coming. It's only about 80 to 100 people, and it's super inspiring. And that's something that we do. I think we're really good at running events, and we would like to put a little bit of flair in them. So you'll see it's an experience conference that has an awesome experience as well. So hopefully you guys jump over there and register today. And finally, if you also like the thinking that we're talking about, we also have an academy that's called Zoo Academy that really teaches the principles of human-centered design, which covers a lot of the stuff we just talked today. And it's just like an in-depth crash course for your staff to think differently and tackle problems differently and figure out how to make proof of concept prototypes, ask like how might we questions, how to test with users, and teaching sort of real technical people the soft side of the business and really teaching things like journey mapping, which is really popular, and creating personas and how to create artifacts for your organization to make sense of the whole customer experience. And we teach a lot of different methods and teach facilitation on how to run this within your own organization. It's a big design masterclass that we like to think that is applicable to business, and that's Zoo Academy if you guys are interested. And that's it. That was it. That's a tight 45-minute presentation, Ryan and Shane. Thank you very much. Now we do have a few minutes, and again, hopefully, got you guys in and out here. So if you had to get back to work, we totally understand. But if there are questions, I'd love to be able to field them. But we do have a few questions in there. Oh yeah, yeah. Travis says hi. He's here. Thanks, Amy. That's my actual smarter engineering friend who came up with the whole concept of the guitar pedal. Um, I have a question here from a Matthew Best, I think in Regina. It says, how do you see no, AI. How do you see AI affecting the design and UX of smaller service B2B websites? And Shane, I'm really facilitating this, just seeing if you have an answer for this. So the question is, how do you see AI affecting the design and UX of smaller service-based B2B websites? So like on a small scale, what can businesses do potentially with MCP, or how do you think AI is going to affect that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I spent a lot of time thinking of the business to consumer side of things. So yeah, as far as business to business, I wonder if it becomes even more imperative to find the ways that you can expose out your internal systems in some fashion so that those other businesses don't have to spend a lot of time looking for information, talking to you, just a better way to plug the two pieces together. So it's almost like, depending on what your business might be, perhaps you do start to spin up an MCP server that's able to integrate into your databases, whatever other backend systems, and kind of publish that out and say, hey, businesses, you can maybe even do it as a subscription-based service and say like, hey, if you pay whatever $1,000 a month, you can have access to our MCP server, and then what you'll be able to do is talk to our systems and have it automate a lot more of these actions that people might be spending a lot of human power on actually doing. So it might become a bit more imperative to find the right way to kind of structure and expose the data that can help your customers actually find what they need with their own agents to kind of cut that loop a bit shorter.
And Zoo is obviously B2B, and I know we put a little small bot on our site recently, and it's not trained on the hugest amount of data. But Shane, I think that in the long run, it'd be really interesting in the future if all of a sudden clients or just people who are inquiring could just go, "Hey, this is the project that I have. How would Zoo sort of tackle it?" And it's almost like the intelligence of our company just talking
Mhm.
through that project with them. I wonder if there's any risk of all of a sudden, like, it's just giving up too much of the the billable money, or do you think that that's just going to be the way in the future that it's almost like you're coming to how we would tackle it? Because a lot of people come through our contact us channel and ask, like, how would we tackle this project? Because they're kind of maybe stuck in this sort of software rescue kind of thing. That to me just kind of came on right now of like, yeah, clients could probably just have meetings with us almost without us there.
Yeah, I mean, especially at the early outset, we trained our chatbot on a lot of just our website information. And we also gave it a few, parameters. We said, don't, say this or commit to anything like that. But it's a good spot for people to go and, like you said, kind of get familiar with our service offerings, how it all works, because that can also help us hit the ground running a little bit faster when the project starts. You've talked it through, you kind of understand it a little bit about what we're going to do, whether it's, a Zoo Academy session or an audit or even just building a full website. So it can actually help maybe shorten, kind of the sales cycle and the project kickoff time because you've actually been able to talk to quote unquote us about how our process works to understand it better, then realize that, yeah, these guys actually probably are the right vendor for us. Let's just
Mhm.
move along a bit faster, get that project rolling.
Yeah. And that's soon in the future. I think people are soon going to start employing that. There's so many tools that allow you to do that quickly. So, I was going to say if anybody has any other questions, just put them in the chat if you guys want. Oh yeah, we had all right, somebody just saying, "Hey, looking forward to coming to X Camp," which is great. Okay. Here, I got one here from a Mr. Levi, I think also in Regina. It says, I've seen a few countries starting to nominate government roles such as Minister of AI in effort to quell some of the existential risks, such as AI is going to take all of our jobs. Thoughts on Canada doing something like this, or just let it remain the Wild West for a while longer? Oh, looks like we're out of time, Levi. Just what a huge question. Shane, answers on that.
Oh man, yeah. I mean that's a big question. I don't know if I have a great answer. I mean, I think my first thought is that I think Canada will let it remain the Wild West a bit longer and let other people kind of lead to see what direction they're going to go. But I do think that governments will need to start putting out some messaging around this kind of stuff just to kind of help settle people down a bit. Like, I mean, the reality is that there's going to be job shifting, whether it changes a role, eliminates a position here, but creates another position over there. And I don't want to say necessarily that's the role of government per se, but I think part of the role of government is that leadership aspect to show that, hey, this is a big change. Things are going to happen. We're going to find ways to navigate through it. But my suspicion is that, Canada will kind of wait and see what other areas like the US and maybe the EU are going to do first.
Great answer. Agreed. Okay. Looks like there are no more questions, but I do want to thank you guys for just spending, 45 minutes with us. I know everybody's time is valuable, so I will let you guys get back to your work, and we are probably going to record this and or have recorded this, and we'll put this up. So again, if you guys like this presentation or want this internally, let us know. We definitely can do this presentation internally for your guys' internal teams, because sometimes people always say, oh man, I wish blank would have seen this. So let that happen. Reach out to us and we'll make it happen. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the future at a future training or maybe some X Camp or maybe on a project. Awesome, guys. Yeah. See you guys soon. Take it easy.